Hey everybody, I hope you're having a good week, and for those of you in America, happy Thanksgiving. So I'm going to do a bit of a quick video, and it's going to be on the reasons why you might want to think about breeding and actually some of the pros and cons involved. I'm going to keep it short, but it's going to feed into a kind of series that I'm going to do, which will be following the progress of what will hopefully be my next litters, and a little bit of kind of like what to expect week by week as things go through. So what is kind of breeding, and what's the difference between breeding and sticking two rats together, because there is a difference. Anybody can quite easily get a litter from rats, but for me that is not breeding. Breeding rats for me is all about trying to achieve something by that kind of litter, more than just producing more rats. It's all about, so there's some people will term it ethical breeding, some people will term it kind of good breeders, that kind of thing. But for me, if you're going to breed, you should do it for a purpose. You should do it to try and achieve something, and that's not to say that you will achieve that something, but by having that aim, it will let you make what will hopefully be better decisions. You're not always going to get it right first time. You're sometimes going to need to rethink things a few times, but by having this aim and trying to improve things in some way, you're hopefully making a difference to rats. And why is that important? Well, every single time you mate a rat, you risk the doe, and I'm not kind of overestimating that risk. Does do die in pregnancy regularly, and it's something that every breeder dreads, because ultimately these girls are very, very special to us. So when you're taking that risk to make that doe up, you want to make sure that if something does happen, you can at least live with yourself. And for me, in order to live with myself, I have to be able to say, that litter was for this reason, that is why I'm doing it, and actually by doing that, that will help rats as a whole. So when little Tato one day hopefully has a litter for me, it will be very much about trying to improve her generation, so making her generation that little bit healthier, that little bit friendlier, that little bit kind of nicer examples of the variety, and so on. And each of my litters will have this aim about them, and that's because when I'm thinking about it, that's what I want to achieve as a breeder. And that aim can be different from every person. I would say that you do need to be sensible if you want to do it with the rat's best interest at heart. So whilst lovely temperament is very important to any rat breeder, it's not everything. So Chocobo has an absolutely gorgeous temperament. If I just went into a nearby rescue or a pet shop and found a book with an absolutely lovely temperament, that doesn't mean that by breeding those two rats together I would get rats with lovely temperament. There's more to it about that. There's genetic elements to it as well, but there's also health side of things. So for me, whenever you're breeding, there are kind of a few main things that you need to take into account. So temperament is very important, particularly if, like me, you're breeding for pets. And I would say the majority of rat breeders, at least in the UK, breed at least with some element of temperament in mind. So none of us, even people who are breeding to create food, let's say, nobody wants to be bitten by a rat that they're handling. So breeding for good nature is not a bad thing. But also people will have different kinds of temperament in mind. If you've watched many of these videos, you probably pick up that my girls are a little bit hyperactive and naughty. I like that temperament. Some people like the kind of rats that will just kind of sit in your hands. Chocobo will not demonstrate this because she does not do sit in my hands, but just sit in my hands. There, she did that now for about a second. But yeah, just sit there, be cuddly, be lovely, absolutely adore the humans, but not do an awful lot. They would find my rats hard work because they're always up to no good. Mog is about to jump on and pull something off, potentially. No, she's changed her mind. But that's the kind of rat I love, and that's what I breed for in terms of temperament. And that's fine. You can have different ideas of temperament in mind. It is important, it's important whatever you do to consider temperament. So next major thing to consider about rats, I would say, is health. So again, the majority of breeders will at least pay some homage to health, and it is important. Nobody wants to breed rats that will drop dead early, that will live unhealthy lives. But some people will pay more attention to that than others, and it really does depend on the kind of breeder you are as how important that is to you. Some people will breed, and maybe if a rat falls ill very young, not breed from that rat, but then they might not take into account if they breed from a rat and then it falls ill young as well. It's very much a bit of a balancing one. I'll probably cover that more when I'm talking about the planning and give you examples of some of my litters that I'm planning and why, and the kind of logic behind that. But there are various kind of levels that you can go to in health, but it's one that I think any breeder that is to be considered ethical should give a good thought to, because breeding rats without a thought of health can lead to rats that live kind of lives filled with illness, sickness, vet bills in some cases, or kind of just unpleasant lives. We don't want these animals to live unpleasant lives. They're far too lovely and rewarding for that. So next thing that's very important to consider is type. And I stress this because it's some that I've seen a lot of breeders say they breed for temperament to health, and that maybe they're outside of the fancy, they're outside of the showing world, and they don't take into account type. I'll just grab a rat because they've all run off somewhere. Now they're all running off some more. Come on, you're going to see. Get up. Right, so we have Moggle Mog. Moggle Mog is a very good example of type. So when I say type, I mean physical structure as such. So in Moggle Mog's case, she's got lovely big eyes, she's got a nice kind of decent length head without it being too narrow, she's got a nice long body, she's got lovely muscle tone. Now they all want to join in. Yes, you've got a nice type too, Missy. This is important because all these things about type help make your rat structurally a good rat. So they're going to be fit, they're going to be well, they're going to be agile, they're going to be able to do things that normal rats do. They're going to be kind of well and healthy in themselves. So if you don't watch for type, you can get eyes that shrink and turn into like tight, very small little eyes, so the rats can't see as well. Your rat's head gets too triangular without a decent amount of length, and there's or even width at the muzzle. They can lack room for their teeth, so they can have teeth problems. So really, your type is your kind of really important structure. And if you don't watch that, you can have problems like goes on in the dog breeding world, where you get dogs that are bred for shorter and shorter heads, and suddenly they have breathing problems all the time. The same could happen with rats, which is why it's really important that when you're breeding, you're aware of their type and you aim to kind of improve it to a standard which is not about extremes, and it's all about the rat's health and physical ability to be a rat. It sounds a little bit silly, but you'd be surprised to see how far people can go in the way of making something look really cute without consideration for its overall health and well-being. The final thing to take into account when you're breeding, one of the focuses, is variety. It's something that matters more if you're a show breeder, which I do try and do. But you take into account how you're going to breed that variety of rats, so like Topaz, which is little Ellie here, or Agouti, little Thing. So you bear in mind, is that shade, is that colouring, is that marking a particularly good example of its variety? And that can be quite fun to breed, but to me it's always going to be lower down in my list of priorities to the other ones which actually affect the rat's ability to be rats. And I think you find that that's the same for probably most breeders, but different people do things in different ways. So those are the kind of things to think about if you want to be a breeder. And they're really, really interesting and really useful and exciting to work on, and you can make real differences. When we first started out with our line, and by ours I mean the Assertive and the Lovecraft lines, because they're basically the same thing. If you've ever met them, you'll understand. We were seeing really high levels of mammary tumours. They're probably talking about 60% of rats would get one at some point in their lives. Move on 5 years, drop down to 10%, and that's just from selection. And you can do that with a variety of things. You can do that with temperament as well. At one point we had a few rats that were getting a little bit sharp, and by sharp I meant they were a bit bolshy with their other cage mates, kind of pushing them around a bit, getting a bit over the top. Not nasty, but just a bit over the top. And again, we've had to focus on that for a bit, and it's improved things massively, and the rats are a lot more rat sociable, which is not really a term most people use, but it means something to us. So this is kind of why breed. You can make real differences to the rats. It is sometimes a bit like you're kind of like fixing this problem over here, and then a massive problem springs up over here, and it's like, oh my god, I've got to go and sort that one out now. And breeding is very much like that. And it comes on to kind of one of the downsides as well. It's like everything's a compromise. And when you start breeding, you have all these great kind of lofty ideals. You think you'll never do this, or this. Everything's going to be perfect. You'll only breed from the absolute perfect specimens of rats. And then you realise that you're never actually going to get anywhere if you do that. And you actually always have to make compromises. So you might have to make that rat over there that is absolutely lovely, but he's got a crease in his ear. Or you might have to make that rat that is kind of brilliantly kind of healthy, fit rat, but they might have like a sore eye that comes and goes every now and again. Ellie's a good example of that. She's an absolutely lovely rat, but she does have this thing. It doesn't cause her any real problems, but it is a thing, and it's a rat I've still chosen to breed from. So that can be quite hard as a breeder to try and get used to making these compromises. And you can really struggle with them sometimes, and kind of leads on to the next bits of kind of what you really need to think about if you're breeding. It's not easy. I would say some of my worst moments in rat keeping in the 30 odd years that I've been keeping rats have come from breeding. I remember, I kind of still picture a moment that I held a tiny little 4.5-week-old baby in my hands as he kind of died gradually. He'd got a kind of really violent diarrhea, and at that age they just have no reserves to do anything, and I couldn't do anything. I literally came home, found him, and he died. I didn't even have time to get him to the vets, and that happens. I've had friends that have had to put to sleep whole litters of babies because something has gone wrong, and even breeding from really healthy fit rats, this has still gone wrong, and it's horrible for them. Like I say, you can lose the mum. They can be fine one day. They can die giving birth. They can be fine giving birth, give the other babies, and then die another day, or fall ill from something, and you have to rush them to the vets. One of my friends had I think it's about a 400 or 500 pound vet bill for a doe that had been in labour for 72 hours. That would be really bad for a human, never mind a little rat. She made it, but she had to have an emergency cesarean, and it cost a hell of a lot of money. And that was all Sunday spent sitting in the vets while the vets tried everything. And in reality, they could have charged her a lot more than that, but they were feeling really kind of generous because they were kind of good guys at the vets there. And that saved the rat's life, but she was given a 50-50 chance. In fact, I think it was even lower than 50-50 chance of surviving. And they still had to pay the 500 quid to save her life, have a chance of saving her life, even if they hadn't saved it. So it's tough, it's expensive. Aside from the kind of emergency vet bills that can come up and do come up, babies eat a hell of a lot. They eat you out of house and home. If you've got an image in your head of making lots of money from breeding, then you're either not going to be able to, full stop. In fact, I make a loss on every litter. Most breeders do overall. If you take into account like travelling costs, vet bills, food costs, etc., you're not going to make any money at all. If you do decide you're going to try and make money, you're not going to be giving the rats what they really need to thrive. And part of raising a good litter is giving them all they need, giving them the kind of food, the nutrition, the enrichment that they need. And different people will go to different levels for this. I go a little bit nuts because I don't like to do things by halves. But you don't have to spend absolutely tons on them, but you will still struggle to make money. You will struggle to break even. So don't do this if you have a problem with that, or you're tight on money or anything like that. You can breed to a budget, but you do have to be very careful. And yeah, it will still cost you. It's not a cheap hobby. Other things to think about when you're breeding is can you handle the numbers? So for many years I was a pet home. I would keep 4 to 6 rats. I would be very, very happy. I'd have a really strong bond with all my rats. Now I'm probably one of the lowest number breeders in the country. I'm up to 7 rats. I'll probably go up to 10 by the kind of early new year when my next litters are born. And then maybe a little bit over. But that's still changed the relationship I've had with my rats. I also now, because I breed such and keep such low numbers, I can't pick a rat. Well, I do sometimes pick a hard choice, but generally speaking, I have to be sensible with my picks. I can't pick that little runty baby that I absolutely adore generally speaking, unless they're Diddy, and that was a bit of a weird one. But I can't pick it with my heart all the time. I have to pick with my head. I have to make sensible choices as well as the kind of impulsive ones that you sometimes regret and sometimes really appreciate. And that is actually a bit of a loss. And I can't just go out to other breeders and say, I want that rat, all these different varieties, fill my cage with stuff. I've got to focus on what I need to use. If you keep higher numbers, you can still do that, but you will also have higher numbers too, so you will again lose that little bit of closeness with your rats that you would get when you're a pet home. And the rats will be perfectly happy. Mine are loving themselves at the moment, but I'm never going to quite have the same bond as when I had my small book group or my small girl group, and we were everything to each other. Now they probably get more out of each other most of the time, though we still have a good relationship. Just watching some of them doing some stuff naughty in the background. It's a shame I can't show two different directions on this so you can see them up to mischief too. So yes, so it's not all kind of amazing stuff, but it is lovely too. One of the biggest things that I've got from breeding is the ability to pass on things that are important to me. So when I talk about improving lines, the other thing you can do is pass on kind of temperaments, looks. What I absolutely love is I can see in the rats I've got today elements of the personality in the rats that I started wanting to breed back before I was Isamu rats. I had a rat called Isamu, where it all comes from. He was actually, I think he'd be the great uncle many times removed to the girls in this room now, and I can see elements of his personality in them. And I think that's lovely, and it's really, really special to me to breed that. And every time I'm in tears over something, losing a rat or some kind of really challenging situation where I'm trying to work out how I can do what's right by the rats, but still kind of do what's right by breeding as well. When I look at them and I see that kind of connection, I see the family, I know it's worth it, and I know I don't know that I'd be breeding but for breeding this family. And actually there are other families out there I adore as well, but that is special, and it's nice to make that difference and to know that what I'm doing does matter in some way, and I'm creating some lovely pets. One of the other downsides of breedings, which is also one of the upsides of breedings, are the people. So it's hard work as a breeder dealing with all the different people. So at any 1 week we will have, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, quite a few applications, people contacting me interested in rats. Some of them will be as simple as I want rats, can I have them tomorrow? Because they don't understand the way I breed. They think I'm like a pet shop of some description, and if you don't know any better, you would potentially think that that's how people are usually used to confronting and dealing with rats. But it's kind of, it can be quite hard getting through and dealing with those, and then you get lovely people that go to the application. So I'm one of the breeders that have application forms. Not everybody does. It is extra work. It comes with its benefits. I'll talk about that way down the line in this series. And waiting lists, and I'm dealing with people on kind of regular basis, talking through and giving masses of information about rats, helping them learn about them, that are prospective pet homes for me, and that takes time, and it takes a big chunk of my time, and I genuinely do enjoy it. But every now and again you get somebody that just doesn't appreciate, well, it's not even the appreciate it, who you put a lot of time into, you work really hard to try and support to make sure they get their rats, if not from you, then from another really good breeder, and then they just go to a pet shop and then they end up with a rat that's pregnant or poorly, and they'll contact you for advice, and it's really frustrating because you thought you'd helped them make the better choices. And I genuinely don't mind if people get rats from me or from somebody else, though I do like it when my friends get rats from me, because there's something special about that, and there's something special about giving people a kind of gift of their first breeder rats as well, which is lovely. But what I want is people to get the rats from the right kind of place so that they can have this good experience, and be that me or another kind of good breeder, or be that a genuine rescue situation. I think that's worth me putting time into, but I really find it hard when people do kind of just go for the quick solution. I want rats today, I want the rats tomorrow, I don't want to wait for 3 months, let's say, for the right rats. So that is difficult. And then you get situations as a breeder that are really hard to deal with, where people can mean the absolute best by the rats and get things badly wrong. It can be a case of owners making the rats obese, or at the opposite end of the scale, feeding them far too little so that the rats get very, very ill. And as a breeder, you've got to deal with that, and you've got to try and work with that person, because ultimately they own the rats that you've sold to them. Even if you have a contract in place, you can't legally get those rats back. You've just got to try and do what you can to persuade that person to change their care, or potentially rehome the rats. And then there's the really hard one where somebody can't keep the rats anymore and they bring them back to you. And actually, all good breeders will take the rats they've bred back. But taking a rat off somebody that absolutely adores them is really hard when they're crying in your rat room and you just want to give them a hug, and you know they're making the right decision, but you just feel for them. It's kind of different degrees of the kind of difficulties that you will face as a breeder, and if you're going to breed, you can't get away from that. So whilst you could keep every single rat you bred yourself, you're going to fast run out of space and you're not going to be able to give them the care they need, and so on. And besides, we do want to kind of present a viable alternative to kind of your pet shops, give people a chance to own kind of well-bred, happy, healthy rats. So you've got to kind of face that and deal with that, and know that you're going to have your bad days and not want to deal with people, and then you're going to have your good days, and you're going to get some people that are lovely. Some of my pet homes are now like really close friends, and I love that, and there's some bloody special people out there. I might just have to go and rescue Chocobo. She's got herself somewhere. We have a rescued Chocobo. She climbed up the lampstand. But yes, so you can get some absolutely excellent, wonderful people, and you can get some people that are difficult to deal with. And you can get people that are lovely one day and having just bad days the next, much like anybody really. But as a breeder, because your rats are in that situation, or rats that you've kind of made and you will feel some kind of sense of responsibility to, you can't just ignore it. You have to deal with it, and that can be hard. It can mean upsetting people sometimes, turning people down that you don't think are ready for rats, or suitable homes at that time. Telling people that they've done something which has harmed their rats is bloody hard, and it's not something anybody wants to hear or say, actually. So it is difficult, but then kind of in return you get to make some kind of truly wonderful animals. Every day I look at these kind of lovely girls that either me or Lisa have made, I just feel a kind of real sense of pride. They're kind of good rats, they're lovely little people in their own right, and for me it's worth it to go through all the difficulties, to kind of have days where I just wonder why the hell I breed and why I don't just enjoy them as pets. But it's worth it for me, and it isn't worth it for everybody, I will say. Some people struggle even more than I do with the kind of emotional aspects of it, or the people aspects of it, or even the understanding the kind of science behind it, the kind of the genetics and so on. I quite enjoy that part. That's kind of the best bit for me, and the health side and so on. So don't think just because you own rats, in order to take the next step, you must breed. But then I would also give it a serious thought. Sorry, Chocobo is falling off things now. I would give it a serious thought and talk to people. If you do want to start breeding, my top tip would be to get involved in your local rat club, or the national club. In the UK, the National Fancy Rat Society, NFRS, is brilliant. You've got your local clubs, which are North of England Rat Society, my kind of heart club, the Midlands Rat Club, the London and Southern Mouse and Rat Society or Club, I think. I'm trying to think if there's any more. The Yorkshire Rat Club. Those are the kind of 4 local clubs. There are clubs in other countries as well. It does depend where you are in the world. And their approach will be different fancies work in different places. I can say in the UK, if you join your local club, if you get involved, if you talk to people, you are likely to get an overwhelming amount of support. I still get support, and I'm quite an experienced breeder, but when I came in, I was kind of had my arms around me looking after me, and I still get that now when I'm having a bad day. I know there's several people that I can just go to and they will completely understand what's going on and probably just say, have a rat. This rat will help you. And it does, and much the same way that I now kind of give out rats to new breeders that's starting out as well. We all understand that we're in this together. If we want to kind of improve rats, and it's one thing that I think is really valuable, particularly in the UK fancy. It's not like this sadly everywhere else, but the idea that experienced breeders will actually quite gladly give new breeders, as long as that new breeder is kind of going about things in the right way, they will gladly give them rats to start out with. And actually they'll probably gladly take rats back off that person because it helps improve the line. We kind of work together on things, and that is a really special thing to be part of. If you don't feel that you're kind of emotionally ready, or kind of even in terms of kind of financially ready or time ready for breeding, because it does take a lot of kind of energy in many different ways, and time and money and so on, then you can always kind of speak to a local breeder and see how you can help. Some will love to have you around to socialise some kittens when they have them. Some might ask you to foster a litter for them, so you kind of have one born in your house and raise it for them. So kind of like a way of experiencing it without all the kind of paperwork, people aspects, because they would be homed from that breeder, which can be quite useful if you're thinking about starting things out. Go along to shows and meet people and meet the families. Don't just launch into breeding and say, I will breed this rat without looking at what else is out there, because it can be very useful to look at different lines and think about your starters and so on. But I'll get into a bit about that next time, about how you might want to consider starting out. And I'll also introduce you to one of my kind of planned litters, and talk a little bit about why, and we can track that one through, and hopefully that will result in actually a litter, because I will say not all rat matings do. It's quite funny in an animal that's known for its kind of ability to reproduce at ease. They don't always have babies, and it's really funny because you get a rat that's been missexed from a pet shop and it will pop out 12 babies like that. You get lovely well-bred rats, you breed it to a lovely well-bred buck, and sometimes you get babies, sometimes you don't, but you learn to kind of deal with that, and it's not so bad. You can always repeat things and try different combinations and so on, but it's part of the joys of breeding. Nothing's quite straightforward, nothing ever goes to plan, and if you really need things to go to plan, if you very much need that element of control, breeding may not be for you, because it's a little bit like you've kind of got a runaway horse going down a hill, and you can just like nudge it this way or that way and hope it kind of roughly goes in the right direction, and if you're lucky you'll kind of make your goal, you'll win the race, but if you're not lucky then you're going to have to rethink things again. And I often joke, we very rarely, each of my matings very rarely ends up plan A. We're normally about plan E, F, G by the time the actual mating happens and the birth. But again, that I find that quite interesting, because it's more than just, it's not a straightforward thing. It's something that's a challenge for yourself, and it's working with the rats and what they want, and the fact that they're moving targets in their own right. So the rats change. Yeah, the rats change, much like we change. So that means that our plans should change as well as they grow older, and kind of the plans that I make when they're first born, like the plan I made for Fing when she was first born, I will not be doing, because things have changed since then. So I'll be doing a completely different plan, and I've got a plan today which probably is not going to be the plan that ends up in around about February-ish maybe, when I breed her, and that will be interesting. It'll be interesting to see what I come up with. Interestingly, the mating that I'm planning soon, which I'll talk about, is one that has actually stayed pretty similar since I first made it, so it'll be interesting to see if in the course of a week that changes. So that's it from me really today. It's mainly just a bit of a one to think about. If you are keen on breeding, if you are interested, just make sure that you don't go into it thinking it's all going to be cute babies and fluffy things and recreating your favourite rat in the form of baby rats, because every rat is different. Just know that there is kind of financial constraints, there is a lot of emotional constraints, particularly if you have a very close relationship with your rats like I do. There's a lot of time involved, there's a lot of kind of planning and confusion and difficulties and feeling like you're mucking things up, and sometimes feeling like you're getting things right as well, and you've got to be able to deal with all that. But it genuinely, I do think breeding is worth it. If you can take that and if you can thrive in that kind of situation, then it's a brilliant thing to do, and we do as a fancy need more good breeders. We don't need people that will just stick a rat together. We need breeders, we need people that are working towards aims that they've decided with a bit of logic, with a bit of thought about the rats, and care about what they get from it too. Breeders that can put the rats at the centre of their plans, not their own kind of egos, if that makes sense. And we need that, and we need people to make more beautiful rats like these. So I would encourage you to just chat. You feel free to message me if you want to, or join a group. There's Rat Breeding and Varieties UK is an excellent Facebook group that I would recommend you joining, run by one of my friends. You can mention it on Ratcare UK as well if you're on there, but I'd say you kind of more serious breeders and breeding questions are worth putting on Breeders and Varieties UK. Join the NFRS. The forum on there is invaluable. You get a kind of network of all the kind of registered breeders in the UK, which are generally really good way of starting. Come along to a show, meet families, meet the rats, chat to breeders in person. It's a lot less daunting when you realise that we're all human. And just see how things go. And if I see you at a show and you want to talk face to face about breeding, just let me know. You can meet some of the family, and we'll see where we go through from there. But I will say there are a lot of lovely breeders in the country, not just me. I would definitely make the most of it and find people that kind of fit with how you want to do things. My way is not the only way, it's just my way. It's not the only way to breed well or to raise rats well. There are many different ways of doing it, and kind of expose yourself to lots of different ways, because then you're more likely to find the one that fits right for you, and still respects the rats. So have a great day, and from me and at least 3 of the girls. We have 3 on me at the moment. The others are who knows where. Some of them are eating, some of them are up to no good. Have a brilliant weekend. In fact, by the time I post this, it'll be a week. And thank you very much, and bye for now.